Welcome to the Do Nothing Project. Everybody hear me okay? Had some problems with this thing today. Loud and clear, okay. Well, good to see everybody. Nice to see everyone checking in. If you've never been to the Do Nothing Project before, this is our little experiment in community practice, sitting and doing nothing together, being human together. Really people from all over the world find me from different places, from the Calm app, from 10% Happier app, from the the online everywhere. And the community is, it's just, I look forward to this all week, and I love the people I meet here, and I'm just so just touched by how much it seems to be spreading, how many people from different parts of the world join in, and I was thinking about the different parts of the world today. Maybe reading a lot about the third wave or fourth wave, whatever we want to call it. Just reading the news from Australia, from Brazil, from India, of course, from down in the States, from here in Canada too. Just with the rapid spread of the Delta variant, and in fact, I was corresponding with this fella, Mr. Wolf, talking about just this feeling he had of thinking he had it kind of figured out, that he got vaccinated and everything was fine a few months ago, and it seemed like things were looking good, and all of a sudden now, with the new variant, with all the different things going on, feeling this another resurgence of fear and worry, when's it going to end? And I think a lot of people probably are feeling like that. Certainly for me, it's the concern about coronavirus, and it's also the concern about the divisiveness, reading about all the anger out there towards the unvaccinated and towards everyone just kind of like bearing down in their, in their trenches. And, it's challenging, and this time is challenging. So I just kind of want to honor that, and I thought I'd guide a meditation practice a little bit about this, kind of a refreshment about how meditation is such a radical act, how it can really change how we experience suffering and change how we experience this pandemic. And the phrase I kept thinking about was, everything is bearable one moment at a time. Everything is bearable one moment at a time. And I can remember the first real meditation retreat where that kind of sunk in for me. I'd done quite a few other retreats before, and so I'd had the experience of knowing that was true many times, but I think I didn't really fully understand the scope of how true that is until I met Shinzen Young, who many of you will know through the Do Nothing Project. He's been my primary teacher for a long time. He really encouraged me to start teaching. And his way of thinking about mindfulness and practice, it completely revolutionized my own understanding. And it's still, in a lot of ways, it's the heart of what I teach. And it's in particular his focus on concentration, clarity, and equanimity, and what those actually mean in real time in our experience. And I applied this today. It happened to be one of those days where, in addition to the news about coronavirus, etc., I heard some really challenging news about a friend of mine. Just had a long, hard day of childcare where it was one of those up at 5:30 in the morning, nonstop. We had the CEC retreat all weekend, which has been, I got to be part of it a bit on Friday and yesterday, but tried so many times to tune in today, and for one reason or another, with childcare things, I kept feeling frustrated. I kept thinking, okay, I got to remind, and in pain and bummed out about stuff, and I kept having to remind myself, one moment at a time, because it's so easy to go into catastrophism for my mind to shoot off into the future around scenarios, or to be worried about different things. And the core insight of meditation is that whatever situation we're in, whatever the scenario, whatever the objective circumstances are going on in the world, we zoom in to our actual in the moment experience. It's both a reduction and an expansion. It's a reduction in that you're no longer feeding the kind of future-looking mind or the past-looking mind. You're trying to come out of that and into the present. But when you find yourself here in the present of sensory experience, the present of the body, there's a kind of expansion and opening that happens here. A quick little primer on the 3 skills, which I'll thread into this practice, which is also a do-nothing practice. So if you've never been here before and wondering, there seems to be a lot of talking, a lot of something. There's a lot of something right now, but it won't seem like so much something when we get into the practice, which is kind of one of the things I wanted to say. So the 3 skills, the first one, concentration, this is really about choosing how we allocate our attention. The incredible freedom and wisdom inside this, that we don't have to just go along unheeding automatically with whatever's coming up in our experience, with whatever worry is happening. We can actually begin to orient our attention and choose what we want to pay attention to. We can come back to ourselves and say, actually, I don't want to feed this worry stream right now. I'm going to come back to the experience of being a body here, or the experience of sound, or to the senses. So there's this concentration piece of choosing how you want to allocate your attention. And of course, the more you put your attention in one direction, the more the real estate of that direction opens up, and it gets more full and more elaborated and more rich. And it turns out there's a whole world in any direction we can send our attention. So that becomes the world, and which is very healing and very grounding. So there's that piece. And then there's the radical piece of equanimity, which we talk a lot about here, which in Shinzen's formulation, suffering equals pain times resistance. So this is about equanimity, this formula. This formula says that there's the discomfort, but then there's the resisting of the discomfort, the fighting with it, the ideation about it, the catastrophizing, the worries that amplifies layers and layers of excessive suffering. It's like feedback that kind of reverberates through the mind and body. So, and that just amplifies our suffering. But if we can instead do, I initially said about the concentration, choose one little piece to stay with and not feed all those other pieces, not feed all the rumination, then all that won't amplify. And a skill here is really the skill of equanimity. It's a skill of learning how to shave off all the little resistance and bracings and fightings in our experience that creates that feedback. So that's what's happening in the body. That's the kind of body equivalent of what's happening in the mind. When in the mind we can be, streaming into the future or worried about the past, and that's kind of creating all this extra friction. We kind of zoom into something else, and then in the body, there's the bracing, the fighting creates all this extra friction. We can kind of open up with equanimity. So equanimity is this really amazing skill that may sound, I think I made it overcomplicated, but I'll show you how simple it is in the practice. And then there's just a last piece, which maybe I don't talk about enough in this Do Nothing project or mention enough, but this is really the clarity piece, the awareness piece. And the clarity piece is really important. It's not just about getting clear about where you're putting your attention. It's also when you finally choose something to pay attention to and you get quiet and still enough, what we find is there's not a whole lot there. The experience is just mostly made of empty space. All of it is made of empty space, actually, when you get in close enough. So everything is bearable one moment at a time. Even this contraction, this surge of hurt that might be in our body, if we can get slow and still enough and go into what are we actually feeling here, what we realize is there's very little here. So these 3 working together are the essence really of mindfulness, and they're a very powerful combination. And that's how we're going to get through this. That's how we're going to get through the pandemic, is in addition to all the other things we'll do to address it from the outside, the thing we'll do to address it from the inside is to remember every time we're in that stage of being overwhelmed or everything, it seems like too much, we remember everything is bearable one moment at a time. We find our center, we make that reorientation, and we see how this is true in our experience. So I'll say a little bit more about this, how we do this from moment to moment as opposed to in a meditation, but that's really the framework. And of course, the irony here, the profound piece of this is the more we come to this center, the more effective we are at actually addressing what needs to happen out in the external world, because we're not fighting with what's here, because we're more centered and more present and more settled. We make better responses. So that was like basically all of meditation in a 10-minute nutshell, or a lot of it. And don't forget, there's a final skill, the skill of care, the skill of just sending the love where the love needs to go, which we'll finish up our sit with. So that's our travel itinerary. It's an ambitious nothing. I'll try to show you how very simple this is, though, in terms of the actual practice itself. 25 minutes. It's 8:13 right now, so we'll go to 8:28. It's very good to be here with y'all. And I really hope this iPad thing doesn't run out of juice, because I got about 15% left. If it does, you know what happened. All right, so as always with the Do Nothing Project, if you have your own go-to practice that you like to do, you're welcome to do that. It can be extremely unambitious. It could be a practice of lying on the floor of your living room, staring up at the ceiling fan. Highly encourage that practice, actually. Or looking at a window. Or you can follow along with my loose suggestions for guidance. I like to take a few breaths off the top, which right away is actually choosing to pay attention to something different. In this case, the experience of the inhale, the sense of air entering the lungs, the little oxygenation pulse of energy, alertness. And then on the exhale, making that nice and long, a long, slow settling. And if any part of that initial discussion stirred up stuff in you, agitation or excitement or concern about the world, which is natural, see if you can breathe out any of that agitation or tension. So it's an intention to use the out-breath to deliberately settle. Of course, you may not literally be breathing at the tension, but it's sort of, really what it means is you breathe out, you're softening, kind of doing a little sweep through the body, so softening any tension in the forehead and the eyes, in the jaw, the throat. Every time we let go a tiny bit in the body, there's a corresponding tiny let go in the mind. It's like you're just releasing that bit of physical tension, which creates conditions to be a little bit more still and smooth internally as well. So very simple thing that's very profound. So let's find our equanimity here at the top, with something we'll come back to, but all that means right here, right now, is being okay with what's right here, right now. That means my voice. Maybe you prefer less guidance, understandably, but this is what's here right now. Other sounds in your space, barking dogs, and neighbors talking, or whatever things maybe in an ideal world you wish weren't here for a meditation, but they are here, and so it goes. Equanimity is you're not going to get uptight about it. You're not going to brace and sit here and stew and get rigid. You're going to just breathe that out, let go, open, and just let the sounds, it's like they're just flowing right through you. There's no resistance or bracing. And that's the same thing for the internal world. For thoughts, feelings, aches and pains. You don't need to suppress anything or get rid of anything. You just breathe and let it all move on its own, in its own pace. So this actually is sort of the simplest lowest common denominator meditation. Just sitting and being okay with the whole 360 surround of what's here. You just sit, you do nothing, you enjoy your own company, you're aware, present. That might be your jam. If it is, awesome. As a little extra support, you can also use that concentration piece to choose a home base to help us settle even more. In my space right now, there's the sound of this vent. It's a nice thing to use as a home base, just listening to that. Realizing there's nothing fundamentally boring about it. We bring boring with us. It's just an experience like any other. Or we stay with the feeling of the breath. We choose some other body sensation, or you can choose a point in your body, like you zoom into the belly or the heart, or between the eyes, anywhere, the hands. And then you see if you can fill the real estate of your attention with your home base. Try this for a bit. And if I cut out there, which is possible, because my screen froze, the equanimity that you're feeling is strong enough that you're fine. You're good with it. I'm working on mine. Come back to home base. sound might change slightly here as I plug in this iPad and plug out my microphone. My apologies, so it'll be using the iPad mic now. Another equanimity test. Unflappable, lying on your back, sitting on your meditation cushion in your chair, practicing being okay with a full 360 surround. Working with a home base, maybe. Hoping you can hear my voice, but this is working still. Good to know. So one of the tricks to concentration is getting sort of extra still, not rigid, just still. And then in this delicate way, getting interested in the softest part of a sensation or the subtlest part. This is actually using all three of our skills when we do this. It's a concentration piece because you're pointing your attention in a particular direction, choosing to get curious about that. It's an equanimity piece because you're deliberately being smooth inside, still. The more still you get, the less interference. And then of course there's a clarity piece here of kind of delicately dipping your attention in to a sensation, curious about what's actually here. And what we often find is the very center of where we're looking, there's almost nothing. It's like, what is actually in that sensation, in that sound? If you get still and quiet and delicate enough to notice. Moment by moment, this is how we're committing our attention. Keep going. again, that word delicacy. Anytime you notice yourself straining a little bit or being a bit fixated or tight, it's almost like you let go a little bit, you rest back, you let it come to you. Everything's coming to you, everything's happening all on its own. There's nothing you need to do except just be present and aware for it. Moment by moment. What's actually right here. And then right here. Not getting into the homogeneous trance so much of the flow, although that's always an option. But more the crystalline clarity. Being present for each moment as it's emerging into experience. Choosing how you want to delegate and allocate your attention. This is even a way we can work with uncomfortable sensations. This very profound form of investigation. Or even with, for example, some aching in the shoulder or neck like I've got right now. Even with an emotional intensity, we can choose to welcome it, to explore it, to zoom right into one little part of it. And what's actually there. We come up with ideas, we say it's hurt, it's this, it's contraction, it's an ache, but what is it really? You zoom in and you zoom in. Those things are all almost secondary. There's an experience at the very center that is always bearable, one moment at a time, and more than bearable. It can become even enjoyable. This whole body sitting, being human, vibrating up through the center. So there's a final skill here. Really this skill of care. The skill of caring for ourselves, which is what meditation is. It's already an act of care, just the sitting, the permission to be who you are, how you are, where you are. And then there's also a kind of extra care you can layer in. This acknowledgement of any discomfort, this desire to want to relieve that, any suffering in yourself and in others. And it's just, you could connect to that warm spirit in that. Some people like to put their hand on their belly, or their hand on their heart, or whatever fits with your particular vibe. But just the idea is that you're caring for this body and mind. You care enough to do that. Use a phrase like, may you be well. Or, I got you. It's okay, whatever works for you. Kind of, the equanimity is about getting over the discomfort of that. This innate resistance so many of us feel around it, seeming weak or needy or cheesy or whatever it is, selfish. But a body, mind that feels cared for settles, and then it's able to better care for others. So give this animal body a little bit of love. Whatever that means for you. Maybe it's just an orientation in how you're sitting. Or it's a phrase, may you be well. Or it's the hand touching the knee in its friendly way. And then we spread it out there. Spread it around so you can let yourself think of other people in your life, animals, kids, family, and friends, co-workers, whoever comes to mind. You notice the character in their faces, the uniqueness of this human being who also, this contraction around the eyes when they're suffering, when they're hurting, the nervousness, whatever it is. May you be well. May you be safe, healthy, strong, loved. This is the common humanity right here. Everyone's up against the same thing of being human. Thing is human life. They also say it's a hard incarnation in the Buddhist world. So may you be safe, may you be strong and healthy, happy and loved. May all of us be this way. Who knows if any of that even worked? 5%. Why is this not working? Hold on a second. That did work. Well, it turned out the plug, I unplugged it. So, bad sound quality, video freezings, we survived it. We survived the Do Nothing broadcast, my friends. I hope you got the audio. I was in the zone. Nice to hear, Laura. Yeah, just wanted to name this thing about what was happening right now with the pandemic. I mean, things are kind of getting intense again, and I know a lot of people are worrying about it. So I hope folks can just remember the practice. You know, that's the training we do in sitting. And we're just sitting in a sense, doing nothing, being here. That's all that's happening. And we can, it begins to be easier to apply when you're out in the world. Remembering one moment at a time, okay, how you're stretching out into that catastrophism, whatever the situation, coming back just to what's here in this moment, not the objective situation, but the subjective experience. That's where we find our ground. Nice, Steve. I saw you there, buddy. Steve Wolf. Okay. Just reading the comments here. I'm glad it's healing, Annie. Thanks, Laura. Yeah. Apologies for the technical problems. Yeah, so Kent's asking about talking a little about titration with challenging feelings, some Shinzen tips. So Andrew can link to Shinzen, who I spoke about. He probably already has my, both our teachers, Andrew as well. Well, actually I've learned them. I mean, Shinzen's helpful working with challenges in a big way, but I probably learned the most from trauma, training within trauma therapy, like what kind of people work with. So trauma-sensitive mindfulness, or in my case, did training in something called somatic experiencing, which is a way of working in real time with these. When I say trauma, I don't mean the kind of necessarily dramatic, big trauma. It's more like there's an idea, kind of small, some people call small t trauma, which is may not be small t in our experience, but it just means the kind of any situation in life where you were overwhelmed in some way, and your nervous system was overwhelmed and you weren't able to manage it. So those energies, they get mobilized, but you get overwhelmed and it gets kind of stuck in the system, and then they're trapped in there. And it could be this chronic sense of chronic anxiety, mine is really chronic reactivity. Anger is my big thing. Chronic fear. It's like this thing that's stuck in there, and that's always just right at the hair trigger from coming up. And so somatic experiencing is a way to work with that. There are many ways to work. Meditation works with it too, through a kind of trickle-down effect or through directly working with it. But one of the core principles is this idea of pendulation. Also, this titration idea too. Sometimes some people describe those as the same thing. Some people there's some differences too. But basically, this idea that if you happen to notice that material, like what I'm saying to you is ringing a bell. You're like, oh yeah, actually I've got a low level irritability all the time, or a low level fearfulness or anxiousness or sadness. Then if you've got a lot of that, it's really helpful to do it with someone. So I would recommend finding a somatic experiencing person or any kind of trauma therapist. Because having someone hold the space for you to do this is extra powerful and effective, and they can pace you with it as well. But you can do it on your own too, and it looks like, you notice this is here. You're like, okay, I hadn't noticed it was here. I just sat and I thought I was fine, but I see actually that I'm having a slight emotional thing going on. That's here a lot. So you kind of try to notice where it's happening in the body. It's kind of in my throat, or it's in my teeth, or whatever it is that you're feeling it. And then the idea is that you go into it, you accept it, you go into it with awareness, you try to feel it, but you also pace yourself, so you feel it a little bit, and then when you feel like, okay, that's, I may be getting a little, it seems it's getting a little overwhelming or getting a little intense, you swing your attention back to somewhere grounding, like the vent, or your body or your breath. Sometimes the breath can be activating, so breath is not the place for a lot of people, but for a lot of people it is. So you go back to a grounding, and then you go back into this noticing this challenging thing again. And when we notice a challenging sensation, it often spikes because it's like finally being acknowledged, so it can get more intense. So we want to be able to pace ourselves like this. And what happens is every time you go in, you've got this, they call this the working with a trauma vortex. It's like on this side there's the healing vortex, which is just your awareness of groundedness. You're grounded, you're aware, you're present, you're centered. Then you notice the stuff that's uncomfortable. It's over here. But you're not just going totally into here, you're bridging these two. You see what I mean? The centered awareness is now noticing the challenge, the dysregulation. Bringing that centered awareness, it's like this thing that goes around it that begins to drain out this challenging part here. It starts to drain off. That's the process. That's the healing nature of awareness. When you notice something and you're clear and concentrated and equanimous, as Shinzen would say, it starts to, it's what in contemplative traditions is called purification, the creepy contemplative word for it. It starts to metabolize, it starts to, the learning changes in it. If you're talking about it from a neuroscience perspective, it's like a kind of extinction learning. It starts to change, and those energies you get better able to manage them. They start to, the intensities, the peaks start to kind of like to flow out, and you're also building the capacity to be with the discomfort on the other side, and that's how we work with it. So that's that's my take on how to work with those energies when they come up in my experience. That's what I do when I'm meditating. And sometimes I don't feel like I can do it on my own because there's too much there. And so I've been hugely benefited from seeing a trauma therapist, over the past, in my past actually, I've been seeing one the past year. It's been really helpful. Because sometimes you don't know when a layer is going to be exposed. Like you think you're cool. Like I went through years thinking I was just like tickety-boo. I had this meditation thing down. I would meditate. I was super still and present. I felt like really on top of everything. And then I went through a period of new challenge in my life where not only were the external circumstances more challenging, but all this internal stuff gets triggered. I mean, God, welcome to parenting. So now you're inside a new layer that you got to work with, and sometimes you need some extra support. And by the way, this community is a great support for that too, just sitting with other people. So I just went on a major tirade there. But, and I see there's a whole ton of comments, which I missed all of them. And I hope that's okay. I hope you heard me. I won't be able to go through these comments because there's too many, but I can see there's some good responses here. I'm looking at Douglas here. My deal is sorrow. Somatic experiencing Omega. Yeah, okay, so Douglas is saying how helpful that's been for him. Somatic experiencing is just one modality. There's a ton of somatic trauma modalities. They're called somatic body workers, or somatic therapy. Lots of other ones as well. I forget what they're called. I mean, there's a bunch. But also meditation does the same thing. Some people never need to work with a therapist or in that modality. The meditation is doing enough of it on its own. It's trickling in and making that stuff happen. So, yeah, also the CEC is a great resource. Nicole's saying here, like the Consciousness Explorers Club, what we do there, it's all about a lot of people with a lot of experience on these kinds of pieces. My friends chatting a lot there. You're welcome, Fred. Glad it's helpful, Richard. Dustin, how do I handle an itch? Well, actually, it's the exact same principle. that itches is where I actually did a lot of my, uh, um, uh, where I used to practice this early on in meditation, like, because it's sort of a more, often an easier sensation to manage than like an intense stabbing pain, say. And the idea is that it's hard because it's like, you want to, of course, itch it. So you kind of, instead of the impulse to itch it, all the stuff that's going on around it, you zoom right into the itch itself. And there it is. And you just sit with it. And it's kind of intense, but if you have enough equanimity, the experience of the itch often breaks up. You see that you zoom right into it, and actually it's just like little prickles. And there are space in between them, and eventually it can kind of break up. And it takes a bit of getting used to. You may have to do it a bunch of times, and it'll get worse before it gets better, just like in other sensations. But it's worth exploring a little bit. But itching can be an intense problem in meditation. Not a problem, but it can be an intense challenge. So hopefully that's helpful. All right, friends, I think I'm going to wrap it up. Good to hang out with y'all. I will be here next week, actually guiding you from Omega. I'm getting there a little early. I'm doing a retreat, first in-person teaching down in the States. And so I've got the How to Guide, Fidgety Skeptics weekend retreat, and then the How to Guide week retreat. So I'll be there. I'm getting there a little early to kind of work out that curriculum. So you'll see me from some different spot next week, and probably there the week after too. Just want to really, send my love to all of you. I think these are hard times. I just hope everybody has the support they need.